consideration of two really important items. All items are important, but these are two items where we're looking to the future of the service, as we are indeed in the context of the overall strategy as well. And it's heartening to see progress being made on these two initiatives, one in Lochaber and the next one in Caithness. So I'm going to ask Louise, and I think Heather maybe as well, to speak to the initial agreement around the Lochaber service redesign business case. Louise. I'm sure Alan will be contributing at some point as well. Is Louise with us?
She is there, but I'm wondering if she's having issues. I'll can text her.
Back to the day. Just get on with it.
Louise should be there now.
Hi, Louise.
I don't know, Boyd, if maybe until see what's Louise manages to get in, if Alan wants to just do some of the headlines.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, Chair, if I can pick that up and Louise. So the papers are there, the business, the initial agreement documents there for the Lochaber redesign. Majority of the board has probably seen it in advance. It's been through all the different governance stages, looking for final board approval. As we agreed before, it's went in parallel to Scottish Government's Health Department's Capital Investment Group. The meeting was on the 17th of November, and as of still today, we haven't heard any official word back. So the initial agreement's there for the board, hopefully, to approve and support it, and then we'll wait on what comes back from the Capital Investment Group. But happy to answer any questions.
Is Louise with us yet?
Hello, apologies. I could hear you all talking, but I couldn't get my password to work, so I had a bit of a technical issue. Sorry about that, but I think Alan covered that very well. Thank you, Alan.
Is there anything you wish to add, Louise?
No, absolutely not, unless there's any particular questions that people wanted to raise with myself or Alan.
Anybody wanting to speak to this item or to ask a question about anything in the proposal? It's been through the Finance Resources Firms Committee already, but just to give it a bit of context, it's something that it's a development that's long awaited in Lochaber, and the community there has been expressing a desire to have a replacement for the Belford Hospital for some time, quite some time now, and we are now at a stage where we're looking not just at a replacement hospital, but something much wider than that in this Lochaber redesign project. I think there's still 4 options that are live. My reading of the document is correct, that there's still 4 options that will be under consideration as we develop from an initial agreement through to outline business case, which will be the next stage in the process in about a year's time. Anne, you're on to
Yes, I was just wondering, Louise, if you could say a little bit about how the different options would support sustainability of services in the more fragile areas of Lochaber. Obviously, I appreciate this is a bit different from Caithness and it is very much about replacing the hospital. But it would be helpful if there was, if you could give us an idea of how we're trying to help the sustainability of the more fragile areas through this. Thanks.
Thanks. I think it's fair to say that the work to date, particularly with the community and in terms of getting the IA in, has had a focus on the hospital, because by necessity that's been what's been the ask and the requirement for a long time now. However, we've specifically identified the work as a Lochaber redesign and not a Belford Hospital redesign, and certainly within the options there is the certain ones that I think would be the most beneficial are about that whole system, and it isn't just about a hospital in isolation, it's being part of a wider package. So it's very much about how we interrelate with the community, and certainly the conversations we've moved on to with the community now are looking at social care, are looking at what other things in the hospital that we don't provide now, like palliative care, or don't provide in the way we'd like to, such as palliative care, will fit into that. We're also talking to the GP practices about how that would interlink. And again, it's about that whole system, again, not just Fort William, but the wider area. So it is very much work in progress, but certainly the options that certainly the 2 that I think we will be heading towards talk about that whole system and not just a single hospital entity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Any further questions or comments? I know that Jerry has been involved in the group that's been considering this, and Graham has an interest in Lochaber. Graham, you want to go in?
Yeah, question for Alan, is the delay, or is it a delay from is it a delay from the Scottish government, or is it just a process?
I agree. No, it's just process. So what happens is we presented the initial agreement document back on the 17th of November. There was a series of questions came back to us, which myself and the team answered back in regards to. We then were present at the Capital Investment Group meeting. So, we were actually interviewed for probably over an hour and a half. So it was myself, it was Heather Cameron, it was Eric Green, and it was Dave Garden were on that call. So we're talking about finance, service. We were able to ask and answer all the questions that was asked of us. So again, we're just now waiting on the response from the Capital Investment Group. It was a busy group. They actually, as you'll find out on the next one, the Caithness one got moved to the December meeting just because it was quite a busy meeting at that point. So my own presumption is that it was that much going on at the meeting with the different applications that it's just taking them time to go into the finer detail. So you'll always get written back to the board with the recommendations from the Capital Investment Group, Graham. So the fact that we've not heard anything yet isn't uncommon.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an issue, or Louise, that it's got to discuss with the board today and ratify by the board? Is that a stipulation in the process that could be holding that back?
No. What happens, because we've ran in parallel Chair, that what would happen is anything that any approval they give us would be on the back of it being approved by the board. Now, it's not to say they know when the board meeting is, so it's not to say what if it's approved today, then we have to put a letter of approval that both yourself and Pam sign, Chair. So it maybe is the case that they've felt it's so close that there maybe, you know, once if we get the approval today, then we send it on, that will maybe speed it up, the process up a bit.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I think Jerry's waiting to come in as the person who has the most recent experience of a new hospital.
Yes, thank you, Boyd. I was really just going to add there. I mean, I've been involved in a couple of the project board meetings, and I had the pleasure of doing a site visit down to Belford, which Alan facilitated for Graham and myself, and it was clear the enthusiasm across all the staff which is there for this project to move ahead. And I think, as Louise has indicated, it's probably at the moment very hospital centric, but everybody's crystal clear that this goes way beyond the buildings. And I was also fortunate enough, I was down in Wick a few weeks ago with Heidi, and so it's been very useful actually to see the difference in the projects, where this one is very much about and is dependent upon the replacement of the Belford, because good as Alan's team are down there, they are not magicians, and there is a limit to what they can actually achieve there, whereas it's a more limited development of the Caithness site together with much with the community hubs. So it was very good there. Graham and Alan and myself also met. I'm dreadful with names. Met with a couple of members of the community council, and they were delighted in terms of where we had got to. So I think the submission of the IA and hopefully the approval by the board today, I think will mark a big stepping stone forward. But I don't think there's any doubt that people are well aware of the amount of work that needs to be done in the timeline to get to an OBC. And although the timetable sets aside a year to get to the OBC, as Alan would tell us, that probably actually means March, April time, where we really need to be crystal clear on clinical models, being able to answer the questions which Anne has raised there in terms of how will this sustainably support all the services around the whole of Lochaber, because it's quite purposely given that title. But I think we're in a good place to move forward from.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo probably Jerry said all the work that has actually gone on over the last year, and the kind of miles we've travelled in terms of how the community were feeling, how the staff were feeling in terms of level of interest and where this was actually going. So I think that needs to be noted. And I think I was down there with Alan and Catherine and her medical director and associate nurse director just over a week ago, and again, just as Jerry says, the enthusiasm for what could be is very high, and the kind of confidence, I think, in the commitment of the board to them is growing, but there's still a little bit of worry that it won't come off. One of the things we've tried to encourage the staff to think about, and I think this speaks to Anne's point, is that we don't need to wait for a building to get our sustainable model in place, and that actually we need to keep going with that kind of wider system. What does it need to look like, and therefore what's the potential of the hospital in that space? So encouraging staff to think in those lines so that the building becomes a bonus and easy to work in, rather than the building in itself being the, you know, what we deliver. But huge amount of work, and I suppose really just want to acknowledge Alan and Louise in that space with their teams in terms of how far they've travelled.
I would absolutely endorse that. You and I had meetings last year around Lochaber and disquiet in the community about a lack of progress, and it's really heartening for me to see as at this stage of initial agreement today. And also, I would like to contribute to your own role in leading this development and changing the dynamics around it. Thank you very much. PAM for that. With that, are we content to agree the initial agreement or whatever redesign? Yes. Thank you. And we move on now to Kate Ness and Michelle with us to present.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, I'm just going to share a very, very brief presentation because a picture says 1,000 words and far more eloquently than I can. So hopefully that will come up, says she. Okay, is the presentation up?
Not yet.
Okay. Don't know
It's circling.
It's still circling. Okay.
So I got it.
Okay. Oh, I can't see what I'm doing. I can't see where I am now because everything's.
I can see it.
So it's on slide 1, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. It's frozen on my bit and it's not doing what I want it to do. Okay, yeah. So as initial agreement in relation to the strategic case for change for the redesign for health and social care services within Caithness. So just a little bit about the journey that we've gone on so far. We talk about the history behind this and what we've looked at in relation to the services and that we deliver. So we've moved on from people marching in the streets, a bit of distrust in that in relation to the services that we provide from NHS Highland. So in October 2017, then we had options appraisals that we'd done with the community, with our key stakeholders. So what we're looking at is a complete redesign of the services, turning it on its head, so shifting that balance of care, focusing more on the community and being proactive in the services that we need to deliver. So looking at that local care where possible, keeping patients at the centre. And through the public consultation that we did, and we put that proposals to the board and agreement of the major service change, and that was approved by the board in January 2019 and the Cabinet Secretary in May 2019. And it was quite a turnaround because, you know, we got the recognition from the public that, and some of our stakeholders, that rather than marching to retain the they agreed that there was a need for change and supporting that change into the hubs going forward. So this is just a bit of the timeline. We've talked about the overlying business case. So the next steps on where we will go following on from the approval of the initial agreement. And what we're looking at with the local care model is that proactive focus on preventative, using population segmentation, so targeting the higher users of the services, but actually being able to target those moderate users as well, so we prevent them from tipping over into that high end. So looking at more of that rehabilitation and reablement model going forward. So it's looking at the right care at the right time within the right setting. And, you know, one of the guarantees is we're all going to get older, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be frailer and less healthy older. So we're looking at how we focus and enable the population to be more healthier and self-management going forward. Working very closely with the third sector and the community to deliver that community-led support So what you see there with the local care model, it's our rainbow of services, and the patient can be on any part of that on their journey at any point. So it's making sure that we've got that patient-centred services that we can respond when needed. On this slide, just to give you an idea of, so majority of people know Caithness, they know the challenges in that we've got there, but you know, just aware that there are new members in that are in that maybe not aware of some of these that we are facing. So Caithness is a bit of a mixture of sort of like two sort of like largest towns. So you've got Wick and Thurso, which each have a third of the population, but another third of the population is within the remote and rural area. And if we don't change or don't look at how we deliver services for the future, this is not sustainable going forward in relation to staffing, cost, and also looking at the environment with the net zero carbon. So we're struggling to staff. We've got 5 sites, 24/7 sites across Caithness. That's Caithness General, 2 community hospitals, 2 care homes, and we are struggling to retain the services within those over a 24/7 period. The buildings that we're delivering our services out of are unsuitable for that modern support and delivery of healthcare services. Half our workforce are aged 50 and over, and I'm in that bracket. So we have a higher ageing population as well within Caithness. We have a shrinking workforce. So just a wee bit of stats in there is that in the demographics that were done in 2018, there were 26 working age individuals for every 10 individual over 65. By 2041, that is expected to reduce to 15 for every 10 individual aged over 65. So huge challenges that we are going to face going forward in the delivery of services. So what our preferred solution is, and will be detailed at the overlying business case, is a reduction from the 5 24/7 sites to 3. So we will be focusing on 2 care hubs. So one situated within the Dunbar site, and the other site will be situated within Wick, but that site has yet to be determined. There is a preferred site, but that the final workings of that have got to be done. And the refurbishment of Caithness General. So you're right, Caithness General is, you know, has had a number of bits of refurbishment done over the years, but to make it fit for the future, there is ongoing work that needs to be done there. And what you can actually see on that that slide as well is the care hub, which is ours to do. It's in our gift to do. So looking at the services that will be in there, so it's co-location of the community teams, looking at the care at home, GP provision within there as well. We have been in discussion with our statutory partners in relation to Scottish Ambulance Service and Fire and Rescue, and in relation to cohabiting within the hubs as well. So looking at the Thurso site, there will be co-location there, but over in the Wick site, obviously Scottish Ambulance Service will prefer to be co-located at the Caithness General, but these are bits that we're continuing to work out. We're also looking at clinical skills labs, so looking at how we develop the workforce going forward. We are currently doing, and you mentioned previously, not waiting until we have buildings and that in place. We are currently doing tests of change in relation to rapid response services. We've recently recruited into a new frailty post, which will work across the 2 community hospitals at the moment, but it is envisioned in the future when we have all the hubs up and running, we'll have a frailty post to each side. So the whole aim is to keep individuals healthier for longer, wrap the care around them if we can keep them at home. So there's nothing more local than your own bed in your own house. So that will be what we will be looking to do. And if they are admitted into any of the acute sites, it's for the shortest period possible and looking at that active pool back out into the community. The hubs, we're hoping to look at one-stop shops, so come in for rapid access to diagnostics, ambulatory care, etc., to be delivered within there. We have looked at the clinical care model and the services of where they are currently being provided within Caithness, and where in the future we can look at providing them. So some things that are historically always been provided in Caithness General can be provided out in the community setting. So ensuring that only acute individuals go in there. What we have is indicative costs at the initial agreement stage. So these always look scary to me. So the capital estimated, which is funded by the Scottish Government, and looking at the revenue for going forward, it does look a bit scary, but if we do nothing by 2040, we will need 17 more hospital beds at Caithness General. So that's another ward that would need to be put on there to manage the acuity and the older population if we do nothing going forward. So the board is asked to discuss the report and ratify the initial agreement business case for the redesign of health and social care services within Caithness. So, any questions? And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation, and invite board members to make any contributions or raise questions now. Bell.
More a comment, Boyd. That was a fascinating presentation, and all the accompanying documents are superb. Quite salutary to remind ourselves that that we're talking about decisions that are going to impact in many decades to come. So there is that crystal ball element of it, but I thought it was a really excellent production. Thanks.
I would totally agree with that comment, Graham. In fact, both documents are really excellent productions. There's a reference to services in Sutherland not being in scope, but I presume, Michelle, that there will be benefits for people in the east of Sutherland.
Yeah, so some areas in Sutherland have been in scope because we looked at the north coast, which link into Caithness and some of the services here, especially Caithness General, and also looking at sort of like Brora, Helmsdale up. So there will be the opportunity for Sutherland to be involved in that. When we did the initial consultation, we looked at sort of the very neighbouring or bordering parts of Sutherland onto Caithness, but we didn't do the whole of Sutherland. So not the whole of Sutherland was in scope.
Right. Jerry.
Thank you, Boyd. It's really just a question for Michelle and possibly Alan, because I couldn't work my way through it in the appendices. It was just on the scoring of the shortlisted options on page 54 of 79 on the IA. I couldn't quite reconcile in my head how the difference in the site within Wick manifested as 100 points difference in the scoring.
That page 54, you said that?
54 of 79, yes. In table EC03. And if I'm reading it correctly, the only difference between option 2 and 3 is the site in Wick.
Yes, and so I can answer that one. So within Wick, you had the two sites. You had either the Tyne County or Pulteney House, and it was split between which site to go in because it was so small. That was the consultation that we put out with the public. So we agreed to look at that we would do a separate review of both those sites, looking at feasibility studies and that as well. While we were doing that, a third site was identified by a member of the public, and that third site is has come the preferred site, but we've got to do the feasibility studies and everything of it. But this was in relation to the surveys and everything else that we got back.
Yeah, but I picked up the bit about the third site coming on stream later on in the process. It was actually the process of the scoring I didn't understand, how effectively two sites within a relatively small town can have such a difference in the scoring. It doesn't change the outcome in any way, it just I couldn't work my way through it.
I had a similar concern.
There's quite an emotional tie to some of these sites, so yeah.
Diane, maybe Diane could shed light on
Boyd, I could answer a question or add
sorry.
a little perspective. The two sites are very different in the advantages and disadvantages that they offer. So a Balneash site is basically on top of a cliff and has got quite limited scope for redevelopment or for additional development. And a Down-in-Kennedy site had significantly more scope for redevelopment. So that was the reason why the location for the Balneash site was actually more central and more within a community, and a Down-in-Kennedy one was on the outside. So these were factors that a group that did a scoring field were quite important, and that's why there was a difference in the scores.
Okay, Diane, do you want to add?
Hi there. Yeah, it's just I maybe can't answer the question directly, but I can point you where the answers are. If you're in the IA document, there's a hyperlink to Appendix EC06, which will take you to the full report from the scoring, and you read away to your heart's content, and that gives you the idea of the priorities and how they were scored. It's quite a lengthy document again, as all Caithness documents seem to be. But yeah, the answers will be there. So it's Appendix EC06, and there's a hyperlink that will take you to the papers on the NHS Highland website.
Thanks for giving us some homework, Diane. Thanks. Jerry, you okay with that? Anne.
So thanks, Michelle. I was really pleased to hear you mention in your presentation the need for us to look at the scope for implementation of the some of the proposed local care model whilst we await the development of the infrastructure. And in relation to that, I was interested in how that work, or the work that might be involved there, you mentioned various tests of change, will link up with the work streams under our transformation programme and the joint project board with the council. Will they be sort of feeding one into the other? How are we going to make sure that what we're doing in Caithness and indeed in Lochaber and Skye is very much tied into the work of the Joint Project Board work streams? Thanks.
Hi, thank you, Anne. So part of this work will be followed through, and we're linking in with the community-led support board, and also linking in with the enhancing community services. And so, we will continue to provide that test of change. We'll look at the outcomes that we've had on that, and I think previously we said that we're quite happy to come to the Health and Social Care Committee and to give an oversight of that local care model and how the test of changes are progressing. They link into the unscheduled care programme as well.
And do you want to come back on
that? Well, no, I mean, that was, I mean, that sounds like that's already underway. I was partly asking the question because I think that in the Joint Project Board, we're in a process of resetting some of the work streams. And so I just wanted to make sure that you know, the connections with some of these substantial pieces of work, redesigns were being made, and because we haven't really looked at that as such yet within the Joint Project Board, so that's fine. Thank you.
So some alignment between the two pieces. Okay, I was going to ask as well, Michelle or Alan, the fact that this redesign is one of the National Pathfinder schemes, does that give it a particular status and higher likelihood of funding?
Yes, you are right. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, didn't I? It was on the slides. Yeah, so we are a part of the Pathfinder site for the local care model, and we've been working closely with Scottish Future Trust and Carnal Ferrar. So, and we have had the support of the Scottish Government from the conception of it and moving forward. So I am hoping that will give it additional support, but I'll let Alan come in and say definite on that or not.
Well, the good thing is it's been recognised, and it's also been used as a sort of best in class of what to do going forward. So a lot of the information we've given to the Capital Investment Group, who have then went out and matched business case initial agreements against the the Pathfinder Model A. So I wouldn't say that it benefits us. I don't think it puts us in a worse place, I would say. But once you become a Pathfinder, it tends to be that you get that bit investment and a bit support, and that's what we've had. So and that's the benefits of us being willing to work with Scottish Government on this.
And you have a junior health minister as the constituency MSP, I believe, too. Pam and then Alex.
Yeah, I think going back to the point about the learning then from this in terms of all the work that's gone into pulling this initial agreement together, all the modelling and all the engagement, the care model, provides a kind of template, doesn't it, for all localities, because all localities have got similar issues. They may need to work through that on a locality basis to make that feel right for that locality. But essentially, if we're looking at a transformation programme, and one of the things that I feel quite strongly about, as people know, is what does that integrated care model look like across Highland? Well, then we have a good strong starter for 10, don't we, that's worked and been worked up in one locality. So how do we make sure we get that kind of blueprint that allows for nuance and that reflects the different localities and the resources available and the profile of the population, but looking at that, it looks recognisable in an integrated space. And I guess if we go back to our project board around adult social care and go around to our joint arrangements, we need to get much more into that integrated space for transformation, not single service space. So I think it does. If we should continue to build on the learning from this and the framework to help maybe push forward some of our ambition.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Michelle, and thanks to your whole team for all the great work that's been done with this. I was actually in one of the protest meetings going way back in Thurso, and all hell broke loose. And I felt quite sorry. It's the only time I've ever actually felt sorry for politicians that were sitting on the stage and we're getting lambasted. And we've gone from that to now everybody's saying, "Oh, this is great. When's it going to happen?" So we're now at the point where we're moving into the let's get it delivered, and that's a wonderful place to be, assuming that the initial agreement is approved and both at the board level and by the Scottish Government. But yeah, thank the whole team for all the work they've done. It's been marvellous to see. Thank you.
Thank you, I will, and I think I was one of the individuals sitting there.
You were on the receiving end, were you? Okay, can we approve then the IA for Caithness redesign? Yeah, thumbs up. And thank you, Michelle and colleagues, for all the work over a sustained period in developing proposals to get us to this significant milestone.
Thank you.
We move on now to the next item of business, which is the improvements to the board assurance framework, and ask Ruth to speak to that.
Thank you, Boyd. So this is a report on progress on implementing the main findings of the internal audit review of our board assurance framework. It's a short report, but there are several appendices. And I think we had reference earlier in the meeting to the experiences of using the new reporting framework at the staff governance meeting earlier in the month. And the feedback has definitely been very positive. And I've listed some of the feedback in this particular report, and you heard from Fiona and Sarah earlier on. Generally speaking, committee confirmed that the methodology had improved the clarity in the assurance that was offered to them and to the assurance that they felt they were able to accept. So one of the helpful suggestions that came from that was that we should issue an assurance matrix to every member of each committee for every meeting that we hold, so that they've got something freestanding that they can refer to. So you'll see at Appendix A to the report, that is what is effectively our assurance matrix, and it describes what each level of assurance means, it describes it, and it also gives corresponding actions that the committee might consider taking. So this will also be submitted to all report writers and be referred to throughout a series of training and information that I'll be delivering to the various different committees, usual suspects of report writers over the coming weeks and months. Just referring to the pilot that we ran, obviously I'm aware that people are very keen to move forward with that. And one thing in particular, Boyd, you've referenced, is that you'd quite like this to be used for the board at the end of January. And we can certainly move towards that position. We can certainly trial it out and see how it works, because we've obviously got some very positive precedent. So the report also highlights an update to the improvement plan and the recommendations that internal audit gave to us. So Appendix B to the report is a slightly revised version of the improvement plan, highlighting some of the progress that's been made. So just very briefly, I'll go through some of the updates. Action 1 on the plan refers to external support and training. So we have received a proposal from an external company to provide some training for board members on a number of areas. Having said that, we're going to be moving into a position of governance light, and item 19 on this agenda will describe all of that. And we also need to give a little bit more consideration to the proposal that has been given to us. But that's something that we will be working our way through, and we'll have to think what that looks like as we move forward. Action 4 on the plan. Governance committees over the last month have revised their terms of reference, and they are going to be going to the audit committee at its next meeting within the next few days. And again, given the introduction of governance light, we'll have to consider just how governance committees consider their work plans and their self-assessments. However, I'm more than willing to work with lead executives and the chairs of those committees to see how we can creatively get around some of these issues that governance light might have created for us. Action 7 on the plan refers to creation of a single brief document to describe the board's assurance framework. And I've drafted something which is attached to Appendix C. And that is, just as it describes, it's a brief outline of how our board assurance framework looks, how it sits, and in diagrammatic form. This has been endorsed by internal audit colleagues, and I've shared it with the Argyll and Bute Health and Social Care Partnership colleagues as well. So it's my intention to review that particular framework document on an annual basis when this goes through the Code of Corporate Governance every January. So I will certainly be looking at it throughout the year if there are changes to our governance, and I will make changes to it and make sure it goes onto our web. So it's a little bit of a shame that I didn't actually use the new reporting framework template for this particular report, which is a bit of an irony, but I certainly will be doing for next time. So I'm happy to receive any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ruth, for taking us through the various parts of this paper. Invite comments. Alex, is that a legacy hand?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd clicked on it and I hadn't. My apologies.
Very easy. Just one comment before inviting Fiona to contribute is that all of this is liable to be overtaken to some extent by the review of governance, which has been conducted at a national level, and we're expecting at any time now to receive a fresh guidance on that, so that will have implications for all of this activity. But with that, Fiona.
Sorry.
Fiona's gone silent.
And you knew something was wrong there if I was silent. Sorry, I double muted. Yeah, I was just going to say, as a report writer, going through those new template of reports, they were really helpful actually, because I think it does really focus us on the fact that in writing a report to the board, we are focusing on a different thing than we are when we're writing a report for our management teams or for the wider organisation. And that real focus on what is assurance, making us think about, can we actually, kind of give good assurance, and if we can or we can't, why, so I think hopefully this new report format and approach will be really helpful to other colleagues when they're writing reports to the board, and hopefully, most importantly, it'll be helpful to the board in terms of getting that right level of information, a bit like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, with not too much and not too little, but just right. So I think the other thing, I think the documents that have been produced around trying to summarise the board assurance framework, I think look quite clear, and I think again that's quite helpful. We've got some diagrams about how the complexity of different meetings and committees fit together, and I think one of the things that certainly I get fed back to me from some of my teams, and we've done some work on locally, is that actually people don't automatically understand how our governance works and what different groups and parts of the governance system are there to do. So I think the more we can do to articulate that as clearly and transparently as possible, kind of the better it'll be for all of our colleagues understanding our system.
It's clearly worked well in the Staff Governance Committee, and it's a question of whether we can extend it to other committees and then to the board itself in time for the January meeting of the board. Are we happy to proceed on that basis, that we do as much as we can by way of moving to the new system in the committees and then in the board meeting in January? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? If not, we can move on to the board risk register and invite my namesake to speak to it.
Thanks, Boyd. And we have been asked to refresh the board risk register, which should be a regular exercise anyway. Indeed, it becomes a regular business item, and so this is an updated paper, and it's just to mention that there's been some small changes, that a little change in the risk profiling of a couple of the risks, and we've added in to the risk register the vaccination as part of the COVID risk, because obviously we've got multiple vaccination programs now running at the same time, and we also have to undertake a transformation from one way of doing vaccinations to a new way, which is linked to some national contracts and national changes which are therefore required in Highland. In terms of the risk register, the execs have examined this very recently and it has been updated. The main risks are in people and culture, also in strategy, but happily now there's good signs that the work on the strategy is well underway, and that risk seems more secure than it was in the first half of this year. We also have risk of cybersecurity, which is an ongoing risk for any major organisation with a great deal of electronic, digital use in how it does its business. We've got a workforce risk, which is linked particularly to the age of the workforce and the increasing demands, and that's a particular aspect of the workforce risk that we hold. Within estates, there are risks in particularly fire risks in certain buildings, which we have discussed before, and that risk remains, and also backlog maintenance, which has been an ongoing risk. COVID-19 I've covered, but also we've heard today about how the virus continues to mutate, and that continues to have implications on not just the health and well-being of the population, but on how NHS Highland must run its services. And so a flexible approach, given that the risk in actual terms may constantly be changing, and COVID is not settling down and going away and diminishing, but rather is an evolving thing with evolving risk patterns as well. And lastly then, the risk that we have of to our remobilisation and winter plans, again for the reasons just stated, and so that risk is high because there is a great deal of uncertainty about the patterns of illness and the various pressures that will be in the system. The risk register will remain an active and dynamic register. We will review it regularly and will report to the board as required, or as new risks emerge or material changes to existing risks occur. And with that, I'll stop for any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Boyd. Are there questions or comments on the updated risk register? We have a new risk added in terms of the vaccinations. I think that's appropriate in the circumstances, and looking to the added pressure that will be built in from increased activity on that front in the coming months. Seems to be timely. Gaynor.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the new risk, I don't see that in the risk register. Is that not an expanded risk of the one that's currently there? Sorry, I'm just finding the number. Risk 715.
Yeah, at the moment that's that's where it sits at the moment, Gaynor. The risk register will go, I think, to the audit committee. I think it goes to, and so we will need to consider how we best express the risk, and then it'll be approved in that route. So we may see it expressed differently by the next board potentially.
So all I was wanting to clarify, I guess, is I'd previously asked that we have that risk, and it's quite different to the risks we have around the whole vaccine transformation programme. And so just to get some clarification on it, I had thought that they were going to be two separate risks because they're two different problems. Even I know they're both related to vaccinations. So I thought we were keeping the SIM15 risk substantially as it was in terms of the risk of disease in the sense of COVID-19 and influenza, and what risk that has to both our services and our patients, and then a separate risk in terms of the vaccine transformation programme, because that risk, although it's around vaccines, a lot of it is around our abilities and capacities as an NHS board, and where we are in terms of meeting the expectations of both the British Medical Association via the GP contract and also Scottish Government in terms of their expectations of what we'll deliver now and in the future, regardless of where we are in a pandemic. I think just the pandemic has maybe brought a lot of those issues to the fore a lot sooner than we expected. So my expectation was that they might be two quite separate things, but happy to hear back from Audit on how that conversation goes. Thanks.
Tim, did you want to comment on that?
Well, what was it? I think it hopefully can help answer again. There is a separate risk which has been written, and that which will be then going into the process. It's separate from the current COVID risk, but it may not capture everything that you're looking at in terms of the vaccination transformation programme. So I think we'll need to review that in connection with Audit to make sure that the appropriate level of risk is included. And of course, the risks around the whole vaccination programmes and as part of VTP are captured in other processes within the board, but there's the question of what needs to be on the corporate on the corporate risk register. So we need to have a look at that in the context of Audit Committee. But there is certainly one completely separate risk which has been drawn up.
Maybe bring Alistair in as Chair of Audit to comment.
Yes, thank you, Boyd. I just want to endorse what Boyd Peters said. I think it's an excellent process that we've now got in place that is systematically collecting and picking up the data, bringing it to the board, taking it to the Audit Committee, getting it reviewed at different places to test that it's right, and then take it forward to formulate. If colleagues think back to a few years ago, one of the criticisms of NHS Highland was how we managed the risk register process. And I think, as we can see now, that we actually manage it at the highest level and with great competency. And I think what Boyd is suggesting is the way forward, and the points that Tim's made about specific types of risk are the way to take it forward. So Audit Committee will play its part in that process and allow the formulation of the corporate risk register to be taken forward. So I'm more than content with the direction of travel on this. I think the area we still have a wee bit to go on, and every time we make a bit of advancement on it, things like COVID get in the way and delay us, and we've now got that happening again, is the embedding of it throughout the organisation, which we always knew was going to be a lengthy exercise, but with the distractions that we've had, it's made it even harder. And it would just be useful to get some comments from Boyd Peters when we round this item up as to his thoughts on what we could do as a board to actually help in that process of supporting and accelerating the embedding of the risk and awareness of the risk registers. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Boyd, do you want to come out?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. So it's a journey, and we always knew it was going to take us a few years. There is an audit that we are been working on this year so an internal audit that's linked to risk improvement. We've completed some parts of that. Some parts will require a furtherance, which we're working on, which another part of it, I think, will require us probably to consider having a corporate risk manager, and we're actively looking at how we might best do that. Traditionally, that we maybe didn't have that in that form, but we instead had a lot of risk management as a subset of the clinical governance department, but that was in a part-time role. And the recognition is that to follow through and complete what's required in the internal audit, we probably need to have something that's a bit beefier. And so that part is under very active review. In terms of risk throughout the organisation, there are risk registers at most levels, certainly closer to the operational side of things. And we're looking at how we get a risk register that sits alongside the senior leadership teams in the operational units, and refreshing that. And that's part of what's happening at the moment. So there is something happening throughout most of the organisation. It isn't a blank page, but what we're trying to do is to join it up, and then, a bit like your helpful comments just now, then make sure it's happening in process terms in a dynamic and continual way. So it's not dusted off and look at it once every year or two activity, but rather it's something that's a normal part of your regular business. And you use it to then set about your plans for how you deal with the risk or make improvements to your systems. Excuse the groaning, my dog's in the background here.
Thanks, Boyd. Fiona.
Yeah, and it was just to note really that the three risks that are around workforce culture and communications and engagement, we actually revisited the definition of the actual risk itself, because over time the risk itself wasn't really accurately describing things. I've just noticed that there has been a bit of a transcription error in the paper, so the narrative around engagement and communications, which should be on risk 877, has actually been put into the column for the culture risk 632, but we will get that updated. We did update that kind of narrative just to make it a bit shorter, but I thought I should just point that out.
Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Boyd. Yeah, just to reinforce what Alistair said, I think this is very good. It's getting there. There's no two ways about it. And the process and the system would appear to be working well, and we push forward with it. It's interesting, and we had an example of it not last weekend but the weekend before, where there was something that the estates did with a routine maintenance. I think it was a backup generator they were trying to bring online, and during that testing we lost some of the software kit and some of the computer processes that we had, and it took them a day or so to get it back. That's almost linking two different risks in this, the mark of the devil 666 and 714. But that should be down at the operational level. That doesn't necessarily mean to say it should be here. And Boyd's right, there should be that sort of senior management look at how these operational risks are linking. And that was a typical example. And I'm sure when they thought they were going to do the backup generator testing, nobody even thought about the fact that a computer might have been affected by it, or a server might have been affected by it. So that's the kind of risks that we're running into. And hopefully this process will help sort these things out. Thanks.
Okay, are we content then to note progress with the risk register and the update that has been given to us? Are we happy with that? Okay, thank you. Move on to the National Care Service consultation, and Louise will speak very briefly about that.
I will indeed. Hopefully most people will have had a chance to review this and take consideration. And obviously this has already gone in now and we're waiting the outcome of the consultation. So it's really there for noting unless there's anything particular that people wanted to raise at this point.
I know that Pam has some intelligence about the total number of responses that were made, and maybe if anybody has information about the way ahead now as well.
Yeah, happy to come in that. I believe there was in excess of, I think it was 1,100 responses to this consultation. So there's a huge amount of information being distilled, and that's what's happening at the moment. My understanding is that that will be fed in as the insights are made to the national team, and that some of the groundwork has been done for taking this forward in the new year. But quite a big response, and probably a lot to consider in that. So that work has been undertaken at the moment, whilst Scottish Government leads in this area are looking at the pathway to a potential bill going through Parliament next year.
We did make the offer of consultation, further consultation, given the benefit of our experience of 2 systems of integration, and we await word from the Scottish Government. Graham Hardy.
Thanks, Chair. I was just interested when we were talking about this at the council. I think I was informed that is it Price Waterhouse, Pamela, that are dealing with the consultation details, and I don't know how that might affect the outcome, because there was kind of sneers or kind of a negative reaction with that when that was mentioned. I don't know if that's I don't know, but anyway, just to let you know. Thanks.
That is correct.
Yeah. We've had experience of Price Waterhouse in our organisation in the recent past, so maybe they'll understand our position at least. We're only being asked to note the consultation response that was submitted. Are we happy to do so? Okay, let's move on then to 2 items, related items, annual performance reports. The first of which is from the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership. Second one is from the Argyll and Bute Partnership, and get Louise to speak first and then Fiona.
Many thanks. I wasn't going to say a huge amount on this given time pressures, but it was really just to identify that this has been a very trying and challenging year for everybody concerned, and I think despite that there are some positives within there, albeit we know there's a heck of a lot of work to do. I would point out that there are a few accuracy issues with some of the RAG rating towards the end, which we are working on before we submit to Scottish Government, so apologies for that. And certainly we are very keen to move into a new space for next year in terms of how our report looks. So this report is the last of its generation really for Highland. We will be having a different emphasis going forward, but certainly want to note the report, but happy to take any questions as well.
Yeah, I picked up some typos in both of the reports, which I'm happy to relate to the 2 of you. Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Again, in the interest of time, and also this report was presented and discussed at the Integrated Joint Board in Argyll and Bute last week. Again, I wasn't going to spend too much time going through the detail of it. I'm sure the board will note that this is a shortened report, which was within line with the adjustments that were made because of the pandemic. And really, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues in Argyll and Bute for the work they did, both in relation to the initial pandemic response, because obviously this report really covers the time period from the very earliest stages of the pandemic, and then moving through the time of remobilisation and getting our services back on their feet and meeting the expectations of our indicators. So again, I'm happy to take questions. As I say, it was discussed at the IJB last week, but I'm quite happy to pick up any other issues. And of course, always happy to be told about a typo. Thanks.
I wonder if Anne or Sarah, as the chairs of the respective agencies, want to comment. There's a lot of good activity going on in both spheres, despite, as you both have said, the constraints of the pandemic, and indeed very good ways of readjusting to the pandemic. Any comments?
Just to. Oh, sorry, Anne, on you go.
I don't really have anything to add, Boyd, to what Louise has said. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Sarah?
I was just going to pick up on your last point there, Boyd. I think clearly it's been a challenge. It continues to be a challenge, but I think what we've tried to do with the report, and hopefully it'll come through, is we've tried to take the learning from that and really draw out some of the lessons and build those into our future activities. So looking for a silver lining.
Okay, thanks. In that case, we're just being asked to note the two reports, and we're happy to do so, I think. And thank you to both Louise and Fiona for leading us on these items. We move on then to review of board governance, and a paper from Ruth.
Thank you. Yep. Well, in the interests of brevity, the report is there for you, which describes some minor changes to our governance arrangements over the coming months until the end of the financial year. This is in response to an encouragement from Scottish Government that we reconsider our governance arrangements, just to enable us to continue to address the pressures that the organisations are under. Just one slight caveat, just to remind you that Audit Committee and Remuneration Committee will continue unaffected. So the report's there for your approval.
We had some discussion around this at the board chairs meeting recently, and the board chairs were then consulted, and I think board and executives as well, about what would suit each particular committee in terms of lightening the load, particularly on the executives who are under pressure in an extraordinary way at present. And what Ruth has committed to the paper is the outcome of these discussions, basically. Pam, are you happy with the outcome of that? I know that you had concerns at an earlier stage just about the expectation that was being placed on execs in a pressurised environment.
Yeah, I guess it's really just trying to stay as proportionate as we can, so that we stay safe and we have a level of scrutiny, but that we really are mindful of not letting that drift and develop into, because sometimes things can drift from the repair back and then the new things get added into meetings. So it really is a strong plea over this next quarter to keep things as tight as possible, and really the high level stuff, so we've got that scrutiny there and we're not generating lots of reports and additional work at this point.
Any questions, any comments? If not, I think what we have to do now is communicate the adjustments that we proposed to Richard McCallum, I think, at the Scottish Government. Can we move on then to the governance and committee assurance reports? Just remind you that these are about assurance, and just an opportunity for chairs of the governance committees to escalate any issues from the respective committees at this juncture. Starting with Alex from Financial Resources and Performance.
Yeah, thanks for that, Boyd. Yeah, we had a very good meeting. The focus of the meeting initially was on the initial agreements for both Lochaber and for the Caithness redevelopment, which we took earlier on to the board today and approved that, and that went well. A lot of questioning, etc., but it went well. Where we actually focused in terms of performance was on the CAMS issue in particular. And how that could be improved and where the improvement was. And Louise talked us through that, and we went through that process. And as you could see on the data in the IPQR today, there is some improvement, but clearly there's more required. One of the things that we also looked at was the RMP4 and the KPIs that were going to come out of RMP4, because again, that was going to be looked at by the committee at a future date. So we're still waiting, I understand, on the Scottish Government to come back to us with our RMP4 documentation to say yes, they agree, or no, they don't, and these are the changes needed. So once we're there, we'll factor that into a future agenda. And we also talked about with David Park about the flow and delayed discharge group. And again, that was an issue that was talked about today on delayed discharges. So those were the areas that we looked at in terms of performance, and we also looked at finance, and Jane took us through the PMO performance, and Elaine took us through the finance performance. So again, information and data that you've received today at the board level. Thank you.
Any questions? Thanks, Alex. Any questions for Alex, the FRP? If not, we can move on to Highland Health and Social Care Committee and Anne.
Thanks, Boyd. I think, likewise, I think we've already mentioned some of the key things that were under discussion at the committee. For example, the discussions with the council about the adult social care gap and indeed system pressures across the board, and particularly in social care. So from our point of view as a committee, so I don't have anything to add, I don't think, to those things that I've already mentioned earlier in the meeting.
Thanks, Anne. Any questions for Anne? If not, we'll move on to clinical governance and Gaynor.
Thanks, Chair. We also had some really good discussion around things like the care of older people in hospitals. We looked at the remobilisation plan, and we had a really good discussion about NHS Highland Cancer Services, and also looked at some data on our screening programmes. The one thing I have to report to the board today is around the Strategic Risk Register, which the committee looked at, and we've seen today earlier in this meeting, and with reference to Strategic Risk 662 around the clinical strategy and redesign. The committee considered the risk and agreed that significant assurance could be given to the board based on the update that was provided. And we also agreed that we recommend to EDG to maintain the current risk level assigned to risk 662. And then in relation to strategic risks 715 around public health, COVID-19 and influenza, again, the committee agreed that we had received significant assurance and could give that to the board based on the updates provided. And we also agreed that we would recommend to EDG to maintain the current level assigned to risk 715. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaynor. Are there any points for Gaynor on clinical governance? If not, we can move on to the area clinical forum, and we have Katrina with us today. I think Katrina is still the acting chair of clinical forum, the area clinical forum.
I am, thank you. Yeah, I don't have much to add to the meeting, and we had a very productive discussion with Lorraine with regards to the strategy, which was very good, stimulated a bit of thought and discussion, and asked everybody to take the key messages back to their professional advisory committees. And we had a lot of procedural things to go through, such as the election for the new chair process, which Ruth led us through, which is ongoing at the moment, and also our need to a refresher on declaration of gifts. So it was there was a lot of process in the meeting, shall we say, but very well attended, actually, all things considered, and a lot of new members. We've got a big turnover at the moment, which has proven to be quite a challenge, obviously, when it's not face to face. But it's good. It's an opportunity as well to get new ideas and opinions. So it's all good.
Thank you, Katrina. Any questions for Katrina? Any points? If not, can I just ask Ruth to clarify the position regarding the chair of ACF and where we're at in the process?
Thank you, Chair. I'd rather not go into too many details at this point in time, but we have had one expression of interest, which I will be sharing with the ACF over the coming weeks. And assuming that the ACF are content to support that individual, then we'll formalise that throughout the process. I'm hopeful that this will be concluded before the end of the year.
That was going to be my next question, what the timescale was. Okay, thanks. Staff governance, Sarah.
Thanks, Boyd. Probably the key things that we have discussed at staff governance have come up throughout the agenda at this meeting today. Obviously, key areas of focus on the culture work. So, I suppose in summary, overall sort of positive direction of travel. We're seeing progress. We do recognise that the pressures in the pandemic are slowing us down in some areas that we would like to see improvement in, particularly statutory mandatory training, but overall we are seeing progress in a lot of our areas, and I think the committee were pleased with the work that's been going on, and nothing else to bring to the board's attention at this point.
And you still got the floor for the IJB, Sarah.
Me again, yeah. So IJB, it was actually a really positive meeting. We appointed some new members to the IJB, so we have two new carers representatives and service user reps. There are vacancies we've had on the IJB for a long time. Obviously, the pandemic came right in the middle of us trying to recruit, so that was difficult, but we've got 3 excellent new members, which is really going to help bring some different views and diversity to our board discussions, so we're really pleased about that. And we had a few really positive annual reports, obviously our performance report, our chief social work report for the year, a health and wellbeing report for the partnership for the year as well, all very welcomed by the IJB. And we also had some really good feedback from Audit Scotland in relation to our annual accounts, so that was all great. On the slightly less great side, obviously we have talked about the challenges of the vaccine programme, but luckily we did have Tim join us for the IJB, and that gave members the chance to really ask the questions they needed to ask, which was important for us to do. So overall, a good meeting, nothing of concern that I want to raise at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Are there any questions for Sarah on staff governance or the IJB? Don't see any hands up, so we as a board are being asked to confirm that we've received adequate assurance from board governance committees and note the minutes and agreed actions from the Area Clinical Forum and the Again Butte IJB. Are we content to approve? We are. Okay, thanks. Is there any other competent business?
Yes, Boyd, I thought we should probably note that, like all boards, we're going through the annual review cycle, but it's in the slightly different format to what we've traditionally known again this year, in that it won't be in public as we would have traditionally done, that it will be yourself and myself with the Director General and the Cabinet Secretary. So that's on the 13th of December.
Wish us luck. Can I just, before we finish, express my great appreciation of the executive team and all that they are doing for us as a board and for the people of the Highlands and Islands throughout the year as we come to the end of another year, and wish them all the best for Christmas and New Year, although I suspect some of them will be working right through these periods because of the winter pressures that are about to hit us, I suspect. But I would want, on behalf of the non-execs, to thank the board execs very much indeed for your professionalism, your commitment and dedication throughout the year. It has really been an exceptional year, and your performance has been truly exceptional in these circumstances. So heartfelt vote of thanks to you all for what you've done and what you've continued to do. And I would also like to thank non-execs for your engagement throughout the year as well. Engagement with myself and with Anne as chair and vice chair, but also with the execs on your committees, particularly, and in other roles like your buddying roles. And lastly, can I just wish everybody the happiest of Christmas and the jolliest of New Years, and hopefully we'll be free to celebrate all of these in an appropriate way. So with that, we'll sign out for today. Slán Jabá.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
See you later.
Thanks,
Bye.
Happy Christmas.
Cheers. All right.